You're talking to a Talking Joe fan. Like, this podcast got me through 287. I felt like I was in a studio with other artists. I'm going to be live in the Talking Joe studio.
Live from the Talking Joe studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe weekly podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, you guys. It's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast, one of Macau's most popular G.I. Joe podcasts. Shout out to our listeners in Macau. So if you're new to the show, you can find out all the details over at the website, talkingjoe.co.uk. Has all of the details and the places and the social medias and the whatnots. Leave a message in the various places. Like and subscribe and all of that. That'd be lovely. So today we are talking about G.I. Joe issue 287, the latest issue that's hit the racks. But before we get into all of that, let me introduce the Zig to my Zag. It's my co-host, A Real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Hi, Tim. Good to have you with us again. And hello as well to the other person that we have got on the line with us. It's only the artist of the issue we're going to be talking about. It's our special guest. It's Billy Penn. Here's the intro. Billy Penn is based in Florida, and he draws comics when he isn't busy being a husband, father, and elementary school art teacher. His published works include a backup in Savage Dragon, the original graphic novel Hotshot and Mighty Girl, and other self-published works that include Flash Trotter, Codename VooDoo Chyl, Bacon and Eggs, and The Curious Command of Colonel Krup, as well as the issue that has just come out. Hello, Billy.
Hello, Macau.
Great to have you with us. And in our exchange, you said, I'm not going to expect a jingle to the scale of Brandon Joa, and we often don't have jingles for our guests on these comic book review issues. But given everything I know, and the fact that you brought up the subject, it naturally played on my mind.
Oh boy.
And I had to come up with at least a little something. So here we go.
Yoo-hoo! I'll make you famous.
Billy Penn is on our show. He's just a guy who draws G.I. Joe.
Wow.
Your own jingle.
Thank you. With Billy the Kid at the top.
Exactly.
It's,
I'm glad you got that.
Such a contrast. It's so it stands out because it's so short. It keeps you wanting more.
It does.
And there's a story to that one as well, which is that I did put it together with just vocals from me. I played it to Mrs. Mark, and she said, I'm not sure. I think I could do the jingle, the vocals better than that. I said, okay, come sit in the chair. You record it. So that's what we did. It is me and the missus on a Talking Joe jingle.
Well, that's extra special. Thank you. I was biting my lip. I was like, don't laugh. You got to hear the lyrics. I just wanted to ask, are you guys sure you got the right guy? I only drew one issue. Like,
Is there another Billy Penn? Yeah.
We're so invested in GI Joe. We will talk to even one guy who drew 20 pages of GI Joe for 2, 3, 4 hours. Yes, we know we've got the right guy.
That's me. Raise my hand. Click.
And this is a first, and it's somewhat serendipitous because in our recording last week when we were discussing Frontline, Tim happened to say that along the lines of I can be a bit harsh on these issues sometimes when I'm talking about them. It's because I love them, and I hope that maybe one day an artist might be listening to our podcast and take on board some of that energy and critique, and maybe take some lessons away. And I was thinking, Tim, you are in cloud cuckoo land, my friend. Who's going to listen to our show while they're drawing and try and be inspired by it? And then only the very next week, into our lap falls a comment from you, Billy.
When I first got the assignments, I'm not on Twitter, but when I first got the assignment, I will kind of like stalk drill instructor Tom Waltz, and I think at some point on Twitter he linked to an interview with Jay Brown, the colorist extraordinaire on Real American Hero. I clicked on that and I went on a walk around the block, and it lasted me 2 laps, and it was fascinating. I just thought, oh my gosh, I knew nothing of this guy, and other than, I've been buying every issue of G.I. Joe since IDW took over. I had no idea who he was. I didn't even know what the J stood for. And I thought, well, it took me to the podcast page, and then I saw a whole bunch of other interviews. So I was listening to all the other interviews, and as I'm drawing the comic, I'm kind of chuckling to myself that, this is fictitious. This is G.I. Joe. We're not soldiers, but we all have similar war stories, and that got me chuckling. I think the Robert Atkins episode really hit close to home. Like he's a teacher, his wife's a teacher. The timing was perfect, and then the timing wasn't perfect. And I'm like, ooh, that's me. I hope that doesn't sound like a complaint to any editors out there.
It is what it is, isn't it?
Right.
It takes time to produce these things, and if you haven't got the time, that's going to be challenging.
I want to point out the sort of double or triple loop here, right? So G.I. Joe shows up in '82, and a generation or two of kids becomes fans late in the run, but particularly by the time Devil's Due and IDW take over, fans work on the comic, right? So the circle is complete. And then there's this podcast where fans talk about the comic, and then a fan of the podcast listens to the podcast and is on the podcast having drawn an issue. So it's like a figure eight on top of a figure eight. Also, I shouldn't assume that just because Billy has listened to several episodes, he's a fan. He may just be someone who listens to podcasts and decides that they're useful, but he may have no emotional attachment to this podcast, and I wouldn't presume to put words in his mouth to that effect.
Well, this is even more embarrassing, but I was thinking, I've only drawn one issue, but will the Talking Joe guys reach out to me, or do I have to reach out to them? Because I'll be more embarrassed. So I don't know, Mark, if you noticed, but I replied to your to your message pretty quick.
Thank you. No, it's very, very good. And that would have been even more delightful if the artist actually reached to us before we took the time. That would blow my mind. I'm very glad that I did reach out. So...
I breathed a sigh of relief. I was like, whew, I don't have to be that guy.
And since we're the best G.I. Joe comics podcast, Billy, you don't have to ask any of the other podcasts to interview you about issue 287, because it's all going to get covered here.
Are there others?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No. So, Billy, let's take us back to your G.I. Joe origins. Where were you? When were you? How were you when you first came across G.I. Joe?
Oh my gosh, I can already hear my wife rolling her eyes in the future. I am an October 78 baby.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's kind of important to the timeline. So by the time I'm 3 or 4, G.I. Joe gets relaunched in 82. So I think if you had eyes that worked and you were a kid, G.I. Joe was all around you. And I don't know who designed the G.I. Joe font, the title logo.
It's probably Ed Morrill.
Thank you. That will go down as one of the great logos, like Cheerios or Crayola or Coca-Cola, or I was going to say X-Men, but they changed that up, didn't they? Action Comics. Like if that was on something, you knew the product you were getting. And if I had older cousins with G.I. Joe toys, or if a teacher in kindergarten or first grade put like G.I. Joe stickers on our paper if we did a good job, like they were endorsing it for me. So I don't really remember a time when I didn't think G.I. Joe was cool. The more I thought about this question, I was getting a little angry, like I never had a choice in the matter. But it's such a awesome property that I don't mind.
Yeah, we talked about indoctrination in our pre-chat a little bit, and
right.
And I was talking to Thomas, my son, about this earlier on. It sort of came up in a topic. He was, we were talking about we were reading War Horse at the moment, and sort of he was talking, sort of wondering, why people might sort of be on the, I guess, wrong side of history, in terms of these wars and things and these beliefs. And why people might, believe something that someone else thinks is so wrong. And I was talking about this concept of indoctrination. It's like, can you try to explain indoctrination to me? And I said to him, well, how you love G.I. Joe? Yes, Daddy. And you know how none of your other friends have even heard of G.I. Joe? Yes, Daddy. Well, that's indoctrination.
You just got indoctrinated, son.
So yeah, I think children of the 80s, there was a sort of certain amount of blanket coverage that kind of forced you to love G.I. Joe.
It's a heavy word to drop for a beloved children's property, but yes. But the other funny thing is, talking about that logo treatment, like the 60s G.I. Joe means nothing to me with that painted head floating above like the J or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even like the 07 movie tried to like redo the font with that eagle logo. It looked like the post office. It was like, give me the real logo or nothing. And they've tweaked it over the years, but it means it has a weight.
Let's get specific. What was your first issue? What was your first toy? What was your first episode? Did you do all 3?
Oh, this is embarrassing. I wrote it down on paper. I remember having the big wheel, and my parents probably didn't know what they were doing. They just thought this kid needs a big wheel. Here's one in the store that's G.I. Joe. Big
wheel bike.
The big wheel bike, yes. Okay. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's not, an action figure. But I think it was like, it's dark green with, red, white, and blue pinstripe stickers. It's got like a molded gun on it. And you're just like, this is the coolest thing ever when you're 3 or 4. The comics, I would say, like, if my mom took me to the library, you could check out comics, and I think I remember checking out 37 a lot. It's got one of the evil twin brothers on like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And Flint's jumping on it. I mean, it's an awesome cover.
Did you then start buying the comic every month at a newsstand or a comic book store?
I don't believe so. A lot of these memories, the more I thought about it, come from Albertsons and grocery shopping. If my mom took me grocery shopping, Albertsons had a pretty substantial toy aisle, honestly. So if you could make it to the toy aisle, you've done a good job. But if my mom stopped by magazines at the beginning and said, grab a comic to read. I don't think we ended up buying it, but I distinctly remember, I think it's 53 or 54. It's got Flint on a parachute shooting at a...
54.
Firebat.
A fire bat, thank you. Yes, that's an awesome cover. So I remember just that cover being burned into my head at an early memory.
So you were not, even a little later, it sounds like you didn't go to a comic book store every week or every month. You were not a regular comics buyer reader?
Probably not until like 88. 1988.
Did you then buy G.I. Joe every month?
I did. I got bit by the bug. I think the first comic I ever remember reading cover to cover. I think before that I was just looking at the pretty pictures. But the first one reading was like issue 80. It had Rolling Thunder on the cover.
Yeah.
I was like, my parents won't buy me Rolling Thunder, but they'll get me the comic with Rolling Thunder on it.
Were you buying other comics too, or just G.I. Joe?
In 88, it was other comics. I think the DeFalco era at Marvel is picking up. So my friends and I are into, Spider-Man, X-Men, New Mutants around that era. The Batman movie is going to start taking off in 89. Mm-hmm. So I think 88, 89, 4th grade, 5th grade is when I became a comic nerd.
Did you, as you got older, did you get out of comics? Did you make it to the final issue of G.I. Joe?
I did outgrow G.I. Joe, I'm embarrassed to say, around the late 100s. I think whenever a new artist comes on, it's touted as like a great jumping on point, but I think it's also a great jumping off point.
Yeah, when Mark Bright left, that was hard for me.
Okay, thank you. Me too.
And it took me a long time to understand that I liked John Statama's work after Bright, but at the time the transition was hard for me.
Right, and I think I took a few years. It felt like years when you're 12. It was probably 6 months. But Wildman brought energy back to the title.
Did you then read it until the final issue?
No. I did get my hands on a final issue after the fact, but then I did get excited for nostalgia. I'm probably like 21 when Devil's Due comes out,
right? Mm-hmm.
Issue 1, and that got me interested in the title, and then I did kind of fall off from that. But well, this is a funny thing. When did the Toy Fair article about Larry Hama come out? Do you guys remember?
Toy Fair, the magazine that Wizard published?
Right.
FARE.
I
might have that behind me, but it would take me a minute to find.
Oh no.
Well, let's guess. Let's say 2000. That's during the Devil's Due run. So
I was going to say 95, 96, 97.
Does Toy Fair go back that far?
Okay. Now I got to pull up my phone, but I'll keep talking. It wasn't till that article where I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy made G.I. Joe. Like, my friends and I never talked about the creative teams behind G.I. Joe. Like, that's one of the weird titles that we didn't talk about. Like, we talked about Jim Lee's X-Men. We talked about Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man. But G.I. Joe was just a property from our childhood. And, it just was kind of made.
All right, Toy Fair started in 97.
I got that on Wikipedia. Ended in 11.
Issue 105, 2006.
Really? Okay. Well, it's not till 2006 where I'm like, oh my gosh, there was one guy behind all of this. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, he wrote those awesome Mark Silverstreet Wolverine issues also that I love so much. This guy's pretty cool. So if I fell off of Devil's Due, I did perk up when he did a run with Dan Jurgens. And Larry Hama kind of became the only G.I. Joe writer for me at that point.
So in 2012, when IDW announces that they're going to bring back G.I. Joe, picking up from the Marvel run with Hama, you're on board as a reader.
I'm on board as a reader and definitely as a Free Comic Book Day proponent.
Okay. And you have read the series since?
Ever since, yes.
Again, sort of the circling back of generations. So just to quickly go back to 82 or so, did you watch the animated show? Watch the cartoon?
I did. My brother was born in 84, and I just remember like when my mom left to to deliver my baby brother, like just after school bouncing around different friends' houses till we made it to the hospital. And it seemed like Joe was on. The closing credits, it's just burned into my head of like the Joe's seeing the balloons falling from the ceiling and Bazooka tripping and shooting his bazooka. I have fond memories of the cartoon, the toy, and the comic. One thing that I don't think people have talked about on this podcast enough is Tales of G.I. Joe. In the late 80s, as I'm like getting hooked on comics in general, like Marvel is reprinting classic X-Men, which was just a godsend. You could read those concurrently with the Silverstreet era coming out. And, Marvel Tales did Spider-Man, but I think in the late 80s they were all over the map. They weren't reprinting stuff in Amazing Spider-Man order. Does that make sense?
I think every 10 years they sort of jumped around with Marvel Tales because it starts pretty early. It starts in the 60s.
Right.
Yes, by the 80s it's jumping around. Yeah.
It's like reprinting Team Up. It's reprinting Spectacular. Oh, did Punisher show up in this issue? Let's reprint that.
Tales of G.I. Joe started in 88 or 87, 88. It ran for 15 issues. It was monthly, and each issue reprinted one issue of G.I. Joe. So Tales of G.I. Joe 1 reprinted G.I. Joe 1. The difference was it was on Baxter paper.
$1.50.
Which is what G.I. Joe issue 1, I believe, is on. And is a deluxe paper that Marvel used in the 80s, and you don't see anymore. No one uses Baxter paper. Marvel was using the original film, so the colors are the same. All the placement of color and the saturation of color is the same as the original issues. But because it's on better paper, brighter paper, not dull newsprint, the issues appear like brighter and newer, and I don't want to say shinier because it's not a coated paper stock. And then it's the original cover, and they've just changed the logo. So instead of G.I. Joe, it says Tales of G.I. Joe. And as Billy is alluding to, sort of as a godsend, right? This is before there were any. This is back when Marvel had done 7 graphic novels and had no idea what it was doing with graphic novels, and didn't have any graphic novel program, and didn't have a reprint department. And DC didn't have a graphic novel program. They were just starting to do some prestige graphic novels, and so the only way to get certain issues was to pay full price at a convention or through mail order, or if you were lucky to find a second print. But a lot of G.I. Joe issues didn't have second prints. And I am someone who, I originally read G.I. Joe 2 as a second print, but originally read 3 and 4 and 5 as Tales of G.I. Joe.
Right. I think it only went to 16 and I was devastated. But that got me into comic shops okay, I'm going to have to get the real 17. But I think Tales ends with the killer cover of the airplane interior. It's a bomber. Dr. Venom is stomping on Snake Eyes' hands. He's I'm getting goosebumps just describing it. He's hanging on to the bomb doors that are open, and Dr. Venom's stomping on his hands. And just as a cover, you're like, I got to see what's happening. And then that issue ends, and I'm like, okay, I got to ride my bike to the gas station next month to find out. And it never came out. Oh, no. So then you're going to the comic shop on Saturdays with your friends, and the comic shop might only collect one of every issue in their in their back issues. So now you're negotiating with your friends, okay, you can get 24 and I'll get 18. It was like that with X-Men comics, because when you're in love with Wolverine, he's not on every cover, and every cover he appears on, you want that issue. But you brought your friend to the store with you. So you're like, okay, I'll settle for 234 with him turning into the Brood and you can get this one.
So you're collecting crosses over with your friends, but you have a sibling, right? My brother and I, our purchasing power went further with G.I. Joe toys and comics because there were two of us. Were you also reading this stuff, playing with these toys with your brother?
How far apart in age are you and your brother?
3 years.
Is he older or younger?
Older.
Older. Okay. So he indoctrinated you.
I think we got. Yeah, but we also got indoctrinated. Also, I think this word's a little too strong.
It is.
Since we were like a natural audience for a marketed property in the 80s, as opposed to Mark's poor children who have no choice.
That does sound better. Yes.
And my brother too. Yeah, my brother's like 2 years younger than me.
My brother and I being 6 years apart and me being the older, we didn't share purchasing power. But during the pandemic, I started cataloging old VHSs, and I was looking at old birthdays, like when he was 3 or 4 or 5. He's getting G.I. Joes, and he's tearing them up, just staring at them blank-eyed with his mouth open. And I'm like, here, let me open this one for you. Like I'm watching these VHSs being a little embarrassed and looking at the toys in the garage thinking, oh my God, half of these are his.
Did he read the comic?
No, not really.
Okay, so when your issue came out 4 days ago, you were not FedExing him a copy to say, "Look at what I did."
No, he posed for it.
That's a bigger topic.
He's shipwreck.
Oh wow.
I actually want to ask, before we get to you drawing this issue of G.I. Joe, which I hear has some great background stories.
At the 2 hour mark, yes.
Can you talk about drawing comics in general? I mean, before G.I. Joe, separate from G.I. Joe, you have made some comics, you have been published, yet you also have a day job. So do you consider that a couple of years ago you had, quote, broken into comics? Is that word not accurate since you already have a day job? What is your talk? Can you talk about juggling and also making comics, getting published?
Oh boy, that's tough. Okay. If you want to go back very far, in middle school, as an impressionable 13-year-old, Image comic starts. And I feel like me saying I was born in 78, I think me being a child of the 80s, like you can figure out I was 6 when this line came out. I was 10 when this line came out. I was primed for the Image Comics revolution. And I wanted to be those guys. The Killer Instinct tour came through town, through Talahase, and
that's just so everyone knows. That's Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri, because Wildcats and Cyberforce crossed over after each series had its initial mini-series. Please continue.
Well, they came to my local store, the Cosmic Cat. I've been shopping there for 30 years. I still shop there. Is it 2021?
Yes.
Okay, it's been more than 30. Oh my gosh. They stopped by and they pulled up in the parking lot in like a tour bus, and I was done. And I think around middle school, this is before Image, by the way, there was Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular, Adjectiveless Spider-Man, and Web of. And I think, being a superhero fan, I figured out, I decoded Spider-Man's suit. I was like, oh my God, guys, he's got gloves and boots and all the webbing, it goes to his nose in between his eyes. There's actually a pattern to it. I think most kids, even watching kids draw Spider-Man today, it's just like a bunch of cross-hatching for his torso and you color it red. So I felt like I decoded it, and I was telling my friends, like, hey guys, enjoy high school. I'm going to be drawing Marvel Comics. And I'm going to take over Spectacular from Sal Buscema. Because he's not Todd McFarlane or Eric Larson or Alex. Help me out.
Savick?
Right. Too many syllables in the VUIK or whatever. Yes. I didn't realize at the time that Sal was a Marvel legend and that he was drawing like 80 pages a month. But at the time I thought, yeah, I can take over Spectacular. So then I go to high school and an Image is launched. I think Wildcats issue 2 has an ad like, are you 17? Are you willing to relocate to the San Diego? I think that's the little ad that discovered J. Scott Campbell. And I was maybe 16 at the time. But I thought, okay, guys, I didn't drop out of school to become a millionaire in middle school, but I'll do it in high school. You guys go enjoy college. And that never happened. And then, I'm in college thinking the same thing. Any day now I'll be a comic pro. And then I meet my girlfriend who's about to be my wife. And we decide I'm good with kids. I'm good with art. I should be an art teacher. But I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to use this degree. I'm going to be a successful comic artist. And I think every year that I've been a teacher, this is year 20 for me, I always think, oh, this is my last year. I'm gonna hit the big time. That is a lot of terrible rambling, and I am off track. What was the question?
So you became a teacher, but then you have published comics. So something must have happened to launch that.
Thank you. Yes. The first convention I ever went to was in 95, and I was reading Wizard magazine, and they were like, here's how to break in. And I think, being a stubborn teenage kid, I only read the sentences that I wanted to. But they said, look at a book and draw a page from a book. And I look back at that young idiot, Billy Penn. He redrew a page from like a Superman comic, a G.I. Joe comic, a Star Wars Droids comic. And that's not what the article meant. The article wanted you to translate in your brain and your fingers text to picture. I translated picture to picture, and I did a worse job. But, none of my friends are drawing comics. None of my family is drawing pages. So I think I'm doing it right. And I think I'm awesome, and I'm putting in the time is what I'm thinking. And that convention was pretty brutal. I laminated the pages because my mom's school had a laminator. That was dumb. The artist I showed it to, they were like, hey, your faces are inconsistent. And what do you mean? And he's like, well, this looks like Superman on this panel, and this panel looks like a completely different guy. And 16, 17, I thought that was brutal. But 2 years later, I went to the same convention with pages, and I was like, okay, I got facial consistency down. And then they were, whoever I showed it to was talking about storytelling, setup and payoff and all of that. And then I'm like, okay. I've got faces. Then I do setup and payoff. It wasn't till, maybe my 6th or 7th convention where I'm realizing these guys are nice. They didn't overwhelm young Billy Penn with 20 things you need to work on. They just did one at a time. And it took me a while to realize that. Comic Book Idol 2 happened on Comic Book Resources. That was like an American Idol style contest. And I was picked to compete in that. And I got kicked out on the 3rd round. I think I drew Green Lantern's ring on the wrong finger. I'm not a huge Green Lantern fan anyway. But that got me to San Diego Comic-Con, where I met Eric Larson. And he let me draw backup pages in Savage Dragon. And I think the contest also got the attention of an editor at Platinum Studios. And he asked me, do you want to draw a graphic novel, Hotshot and Mighty Girl? To which I said yes. That was the year my son was born, so I was teaching. I was in my 2nd or 3rd year teaching. I had a newborn, and I'm drawing this comic, and they shot it from the pencils. It never had an inker. And by the time it got published in '08, I think I drew it in 6 months, and it probably took till '08 to get printed. That's when you were like, uh-oh, maybe the wheels are coming off at Platinum. I don't know if that's a fair assessment to say. But that was followed by another graphic novel that was twice as long, and it will never see the light of day. And that was a little disheartening. And at that point, I thought maybe I should draw my own stuff.
What was the stuff of your own that you were then drawing?
Well, I wanted to draw an Indiana Jones style adventure comic. That was my Flash Trotter stuff. And again, I so much of my artwork I just put under my bed. Like I do it for the exercise of drawing it. I don't really I don't really care about putting it out there. It's so much more extra work that these only have like a print run of like 50, and most of them are in my closet, or I sell them at like a convention here in town. I just like seeing it in print. So yes, there's Flash Trotter, there's Bacon and Eggs, there's VooDoo Chyl. I was shocked by your intro, Mark. You did your homework. I didn't think anyone knew about those.
Thank you.
So how did you find Tom Waltz, or how did Tom Waltz find you? Because I mean, certainly these issues of G.I. Joe right now that are self-contained issues, that's a good place to try out different artists and new artists. And certainly IDW, as a smaller publisher, might be looking for newer artists who are more available, or maybe don't command the page rate of a Todd McFarlane. I know Todd McFarlane doesn't pay himself a page rate when he works on Spawn these days. But so
Right.
how did Tom Waltz find you?
This is okay. I will answer your question directly. I drove up to. He was coming to a Dragon Con in Atlanta, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the G.I. Joe editor, and he was there as a Ghostbusters writer. He was there as comic creator Tom Waltz. But I was like, hey, I know something. He's the editor of G.I. Joe. I draw parody portraits of coworkers, my wife's coworkers. These kind of things are on my blog. And I was like, let me draw a parody portrait of Tom Waltz and just hand it to him with my contact information on the back. And my family thought I was nuts. I was just doing a day trip up to Atlanta, 4-hour drive up, buy the ticket, walk through Atlanta, find Tom Waltz, give him the picture, get in the car, drive back. That's what I did. Mission accomplished. And then I drove back home, knowing that, I could sleep well at night knowing that I tried. There's no big what ifs lingering over my head. But he really smiled, and he really liked it. I think he posted it on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, but my brother showed me. So he knew me that way. But then I thought, at my age, you just want to try things, and they might not pan out, but you're going to kick yourself if you don't try. So I thought, let me give him this. I got a business card from him, and I thought, if nothing comes of this, I can go to bed tomorrow knowing I tried. It's not my fault. I think about a year or two later, I got an email from him out of the blue saying like, hey, will you draw some Napoleon Dynamite pages for me? They're trying to get the Napoleon Dynamite license. And I thought, sure. And it's funny, I drew them and I put them on a photograph of torn notebook paper with like a wooden desk underneath it. So the aesthetic I was going for was kind of like my art style, but presented in like a notebook. Like I thought that would be cool for a Napoleon Dynamite comic. And then, the comic's announced and my name's not on it. So I thought, okay. I was like, that didn't happen. And every year that passes, I'm like, oh no, is Larry going to leave? Is the book going to get canceled? Is Tom Waltz going to leave? There's always that black cloud hanging over my head. And then every other time I draw comics, which is very rare, it's an itch I don't scratch that often. But every time I do, in the back of my head, I'm like, I got to get these to Tom Waltz. And this summer, when school ended, probably one of my most brutal brutal school years teaching, I thought, okay, I got to draw Flash Trotter 5, get those pages to Tom Waltz, and maybe something will come of it. And then I got an email out of the blue, like, from Tom Waltz, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And the subject was like G.I. Joe comic, and I thought, what? Sure. And it was, would you be interested in drawing an upcoming issue? And I'm like running around the house. My family sees this big grin on my face. I'm looking at the phone, and they're like, what's wrong with you? And they knew they knew 3 years ago I drove up to Atlanta for that reason. They know that I go. There's a comic. There's Joe Lanta. That is also in Atlanta. That's around spring break time. And Larry has shown up to those. And I've driven up there just to say, hey, here's some self-published comics I've done. I really love to work with you, Mr. Hama. Sensei Hama.
And was this where the Larry Hama portraits that we can find on your blog, is that where that came from, that you drew those to give to him?
It is. He's a very quiet dude. Well, he came to a convention in Florida. He went to Pensacon, and Pensacola's like 3 hours to the left of Talahase on a map. I guess that's west.
That's the name for it, yeah.
Yeah, you go left. Hang a left on I-10. He was there, and I was shocked. It was held in like a civic center, and, around the perimeter of the seating, they just had like these tiny tables and chairs, and he was just sitting there. I was like, this is where they would sell, like glow necklaces. And I'm thinking he should have had his own throne. He should have been like the number one guest. So I introduced myself and showed him some comics, and we chit-chatted for a while. And then he came to a Talahase convention, which I was floored by, because we don't even really do conventions. And we talked, he and I talked for an hour there, and he seemed very receptive to me and my artwork. And then I noticed he's been going to Joe Lanta's, and I thought, you know what? I make these goofy little parody portraits for coworkers and my wife's coworkers and our holiday Christmas cards. Maybe I can make one for him. What cover should I do that showcases like a face? And I realized like G.I. Joe 94. Snake Eyes is unwrapping. And that's a cool story, because if you look at the back of G.I. Joe 93, it says coming next issue. He's pointing a gun at your face. I guess the gun never saw print. Yeah, there's an Easter egg. So I drew that and I gave it to him, and he smiled and he looked receptive, and you just kind of get these fantasies in your head. I thought, oh, he'll ask to take a picture with it, and he didn't. So then I felt extra awkward. I was like, can I get a picture of you holding this picture that I just made of you? So I took that picture of him, and I was like, okay, maybe he doesn't like it. I tried. And then Netflix, the Toys That Made Us, they interview him, and he's writing in his studio, and on the door of his studio is that picture.
Oh, wow.
And I fell off the back of the couch. Like I was going scuba diving. I just kind of was like, what? Like, not only did it make it home, it was in a place of prominence. So that made me smile the rest of the day. And then the next Joe Lanta, I put him on the cover of issue 9, and I kind of threatened him. I was like, I'm going to keep drawing these for you until we work together. which is really incentive for him, if he likes them, to never work with me. Like the 4.5 hour car ride home, I'm like, God, you're such an idiot. That's such a stupid threat. So then the following year, I drew 3 Larry Hamas for issue 55. And that weekend, COVID hit. The world was never the same again. So I thought, I'll just hold on to this. But I had made another one, a parody cover of him for, I believe it's 53. It's him as kind of Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes is holding his Uzi, and it's like the 1986 anniversary cover.
Yeah, for Marvel's 25th.
Right. Snake Eyes is holding his weapon of choice, so I gave Mr. Hama a graphite pencil, because he always talks about how he's a writer with a pencil. And he hasn't been to a Joe Lanta since. But when this gig came up, I finally sent him a high-res JPEG of the issue 55 cover, and I said, I wanted to give you this at Joe Lanta 2020. And then when I turned in my last pages, I thanked him for his fantastic script, and I said, and here's the one I wanted to give you in 2021. Has he done anything with them? I don't know. That's not up to me. And maybe that helped get me the job. I don't know. But I did one for Tom Waltz. So yeah.
All right. So Tom Waltz had you do some pages for a Napoleon Dynamite tryout.
Right.
Did you draw anything else for IDW between that and this G.I. Joe?
No.
Okay. So what's the timeline of this G.I. Joe issue? When did you get that email? When did you get the script or the plot, I should say?
Well, this is funny. I listened to Talking Joes. You guys interviewed Robert Atkins, and he teaches, and his wife is a teacher, and his story was very similar to mine. I got the email from Tom Waltz right at the beginning of summer vacation, right? Early June. And I am just giddy for days. And I shocked myself. The adult in me was like, well, I'm taking my son to football camp all week. My wife and I are going out of country. We're going to Costa Rica on vacation. I really can't work on it till like July. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. Because 20 years ago, I'd have been like, honey, I'm quitting work. I'm drawing G.I. Joe from now on. But some kind of responsibility switch went off in my brain. I thought, who am I to tell them I can't do it? But Tom Waltz was like, no, that's fine. We're going to get the script from Larry the end of June. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got all of July open. This is amazing. I couldn't have planned it better. This can't be happening. This can't be real. He says the cover should be introducing the new Joes, and they're going to take a tour of the pit. And like a wind-up car, like he just put me down on the ground, and I'm like, boom, I'm there. He said, kind of like that page from issue 3, I'll send you a JPEG. And I'm like, nope, I got it right here in my lap. And I thought, it looks a little flat. I don't think I've ever in my life seen a G.I. Joe cover that's like a cross-section of the base. Mm-hmm. Usually they're dynamic. They're Mike Zeck. They're Mike Golden.
But fans will know the cross-sections of the pit, which has now been done 2 or 3 times.
Well, that was my big problem. My whole wind-up car analogy, like I hit the ground running and I drew it and I submitted it and I went to Costa Rica, and the whole time I'm like, hold up. Should that have been the Utah pit, like above ground? And then I'm going through all my SL Gallant issues, and there's a bunch. But he did a fantastic cross-section in 200. And I'm like, oh my gosh, none of these vehicles are where they should be. The control room is off. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can just tell the fans, I'm sorry, I screwed up. It's the Fort Wadsworth pit. And then my brain is like, wait, didn't that get demoed and covered with cement in like issue 55?
And this is why
there's a Defiant launching out of Fort Wadsworth, it's going to be a little bit conspicuous.
Right.
This is why G.I. Joe fans actually can't get hired to draw G.I. Joe comics professionally, because they'll talk themselves out of it.
Right. I just got too excited. I was like, oh, I'll up, the issue 3 page doesn't have any modern vehicles in it. I think it's got some tanks and some vamps. And I'm like, oh man, it needs like Sergeant Slaughter's Warthog. It needs some Havocs. It needs the Defiant. And I could argue that it doesn't launch from there. It's just getting repaired by Outback.
His MO, yeah.
Yeah, and then you just think like, well, wouldn't that just be like on a launch site somewhere? Like, why would it even be underground?
If you're looking for a fan to tell you that this cover is okay, that if it's inconsistent or you got something wrong or you broke a rule, it's still okay. Billy, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
because covers can be an exaggeration. Like the cover to 84, where the two ninjas are holding Zartan, and he's there's the lava, and he's like on trial in front of Cobra Commander. That's an evocative image that is not literally a depiction of the inside of that comic.
I agree.
And you cross section, and then having the Joes repeated 3 times, and having word balloons on the cover. Right, this cover is already a very different kind of cover.
Right, and I give all credit and blame to Tom Waltz. No, all credit to Tom Waltz. He came up with the "Okay, newbies, welcome to the pit." And I thought, if something bad happens, if I die in Costa Rica on a zip line, if I, I'm going to fill this with all my favorite Joes. And the first Joe action figure I ever had was Breaker. My buddy Chuck got it for me on my 5th birthday. I put Breaker in the communications room with the bubble that he always blows. And then only getting back from Costa Rica, like, oh no, he's dead. He died in a word balloon off panel. So it's funny, he's not on the cover. Like, someone did catch that and got rid of the bubble he's blowing.
Oh, so now it's sort of Sparks.
It's Sparks, yeah.
But again, okay, so I wouldn't want to see a dead Joe in a background inside the issue. But I don't actually mind seeing a dead Joe on the cover, because this image is not, again, a literal scene that happens in the ongoing G.I. Joe storyline. Also, this scene, if Breaker was there blowing the bubble, this scene could have been before he died.
Oh, agreed.
With the newbies, yeah, okay. And there's a cool photo of your drawing boards, and it looks like maybe you're on a sports field or something, Billy?
That was my son's football camp I was alluding to at the top. Yes, I kind of drew those while he was at football camp, not to brag, not to get people next to me like, ooh, what's that? Oh, nothing, just G.I. Joe 287.
I think the bragging here is that you drew a cover of G.I. Joe outside sitting on bleachers.
Oh, yeah.
Because most people want to be comfortable and, listen to music or at their preferred desk.
Well, let this be a reminder to all the kids out there that Facebook is carefully curated, and that maybe I didn't draw 90% of it on the bleachers, but I thought it'd make a good photo.
But you drew a little of it.
Right.
So then some time goes by before you get the plot.
Oh, it's funny. Snake Eyes is even on the cover. I was like, I got to put Snake Eyes. He's going down the stairs with Jinx. Yep. That's the only time I've drawn Snake Eyes professionally. So yes, this is the funny story. We come back from Costa Rica on the 26th. The email says I'm supposed to get my script on the 26th, and nothing. And now it's July, and every week July goes by, and I'm not making a nuisance of myself. I was like, okay, it'll come when it comes, but we're getting closer to pre-planning. This was the shortest summer vacation for Leon County. We're supposed to go back early August, and they're giving us 2 weeks of pre-planning. And July is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And I went through my long boxes and took out every G.I. Joe that Shannon drew. And I took my phone and I took every picture of the pit I could find. And on my computer desktop is like mess hall folder, communications folder. To his credit, you could build his pit in 3D and it would all make sense.
The sentence that launched 1,000 dioramas. Sorry, please continue.
I may have looked at those dioramas too. Like, I need a screenshot. Yes. This is even creepy. There's a neighbor down the street where I live. We're Facebook friends. 9 years ago, he posted a picture of his kids playing with G.I. Joes. And my brain just filed that away like a psychopath. So that 9 years later, out of the blue, I was like, hey, do you still have those G.I. Joe toys that you posted one time back in February 2013? And he let me borrow them. And it's funny, they're all 86s. I think he's a few years older than me, and he took care of them. I think, when I'm 5 buying Torpedo and his flippers are going down the bathtub drain, I did not take care of these G.I. Joes.
All right, so when do you get the plot and how much time do you have?
I am so sorry. That was your first question.
No, that's okay. You remember my interview on this show got broken into 2 episodes, so
right.
I know about talking for a while.
Well, that was it. I got the plot. Okay, we go back to school. I've collected as much vehicle reference as you can. I've collected as much pit reference as you can. July ends. August begins. I'm going back to school. And I'm going back, shoulders slumped, heads down. I get the plot the Friday of pre-planning. We have open house orientation on Thursday at my school so that teachers can label their desks and everything on Friday, kind of have a chill Friday. That Friday afternoon, I got the script and I thought, oh, cool. I get to teach on Monday and G.I. Joe's going to occupy my brain. And I get the script and I read it. I think, I'm just going off of memory here, the sentence that Tom Waltz attached to the email was like, hey, Larry kind of did his own thing like he's prone to do. And no pit, no vehicles. None of the stuff that I collected reference for is in that issue. So, yeah, I thought that was funny.
There's one panel. What are you talking about? There's one panel in this 20-page comic that takes place in the pit. And you can see past a few shoulders. You can see a little bit of pit ceiling and some generic screens behind several Joes in this one panel.
Not in the script.
Oh.
I was like, I'm drawing Duke. I'm drawing Blowtorch. I'm drawing Rakondo and Beachhead. That was not in the script.
I'm just gonna read this for our readers. I sent the burst to Duke. We can pack up and haul. Drop rucks, ammo, weapons, and water only. Here's the panel. In the pit. Is that an encrypted burst coming in from Black Hat? Decoding it now, Duke. Hi, Mom. We got here safe. One panel.
Yes, I was determined to put the pit in this issue.
Okay, so all right, so.
And I dropped Rakondo in there, and then later in the issue, I knew Black Hat would say, Psych Out. She mentioned Psych Out, and I'm thinking, why didn't I draw Psych Out in the pit?
Yeah, Larry always has Duke, Mainframe, Chuckles, and Psych Out, sort of like running the show back at the pit. I'm just going to guess that Blowtorch is an important character to you because he's in this panel conspicuously.
Yes, I almost wanted to draw Smoke on the right hand of the panel, like he had just put out a fire.
I think that's a metaphor for you drawing this issue. All right, so thank you for that setup. Okay. All right, so at what point are you rushing to draw?
Well, that's the other thing. I'm going to my comic shop regularly, and I'm asking my guy, I'm like, when does this issue come out? Like, I did not want to ask Tom Waltz.
Oh, no.
I was trying not to broach the subject of deadlines.
Because you're worried that if you ask about a deadline, you'll look like you're complaining.
If you ask about it, then you will then have one.
Right.
Or that you'll right.
That one. The one Mark said. I was like, okay, it doesn't exist. It's like Schrodinger's deadline.
I think
simultaneously have a deadline and don't have a deadline. Because...
I think that's a fictional country in Europe in Larry Hama's G.I. Joe.
Oh, okay.
Mark will get that. All right. So when do you actually get a deadline?
Well, I didn't know this, but Tom Waltz, I think the following Wednesday was like, hey, just doing my Wednesday checkup. And I'm like, oh, okay, these are Wednesday checkups. I didn't know that. So he's like, after I submitted thumbnails and I blew up the thumbnails as I went from like page 1, the faces are just like the oval with the cross mark for the eyes and symmetry.
And are these the thumbnails that were on the script? So you're marking up the script? I'm
marking up the script. I did kind of reformat it with, justification and all of that so that one page of script was one page of comic, whereas his script is just kind of, you blow through page 1 through page 20 and it might be 12 pieces of paper. I don't know. But I printed out 20 pieces of paper. The thumbnails got more and more and more detailed as I went. And then I thought maybe these could pass as pencils. I reformatted them in Pages and kind of submitted those to editorial. And I did change some panels here and there, so I would send them like a page 1A and a page 1B, and I'm like, which one do you think works better? And they would be like, page 1B looks better than page 1A. Maybe a panel was horizontal or vertical. And I think between submitting those on like a Friday and getting the checkup email on a Wednesday, he was like, just checking in. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've only done like a page and a half in 5 days. And that's when the shoe dropped and he said, well, we want these penciled and inked as close to September 20th as you can. And I thought, oh my gosh, here we are in September. That's like a page a day. And I think I took off 2 days of work, but I really stayed focused and drew these. Didn't lose a lot of sleep, thank goodness. But it was a bit of a marathon.
Just for our listeners who may not know a lot about the making of comics, a page a day is often the average for drawing a page of comics. But you can imagine that would be more difficult if 6 or 10 hours of that day involves going to your other job.
Yeah.
Right. And my other job gets the best of me. They get my energy. I can't show up in a classroom tired or distracted, but I can come home and pencil tired and distracted.
And you came up with a method to keep you on track?
I paint a mural with my 5th graders every year, and I end up painting a lot of it by myself on the weekends, and my wife will call and be like, bring home dinner or whatever. and what I've learned is if I set my timer on my phone for like every 8 or 9 minutes, I can make these little micro goals. Mm-hmm. And I adopted that with these G.I. Joe pages. So I'm never once like just zoning out. It would be like, hey, can I draw all the Black Hat faces? Can I ink all the Black Hat faces in the next 9 minutes? And then the alarm would go off. And sometimes I meet that goal, sometimes I don't. Can I draw all the jungle foliage on this page for the next 9 minutes? So it's really just kind of doing that until the book gets done.
And there's a name for that almost, the Pomodoro Method, which is 25 minutes of work followed by 5-minute breaks. So there's some, I guess, theory behind it of, these sort of micro goals and sort of, pushing yourself to keep on accomplishing things and not get distracted within that sort of allotted time.
Yeah, if I can hop in for a second, in my own both reading comics, right? Like I think we've all read comics where a very popular artist who draws in a detailed style, the first 10 pages are the best, and by the end of the book, you sort of see like details or backgrounds drop out, or like conspicuous objects or characters are just knocked out in black silhouette. And
Agreed.
You think, oh, did this artist run out of time? Yes, this artist did run out of time. Or in sort of more extreme cases, like someone else is drawing the final pages, or, this like hot artist pencils and inks the first half of the book, and then someone else inks the second half of it, and then someone else inks the final page, and it all like sort of falls apart. I
was going to say, I know some artists sort of try and combat that issue of sort of good pages at the front versus rush pages at the end by sort of drawing out of order. I think Simon Bisley sometimes would do that.
P. Craig Russell and his big 12-issue opera cycle for Dark Horse 10-15 years ago drew issue 12 first, and drew issue 1 last.
Oh wow.
So that, I don't see a difference because this stuff is so great.
Right.
But you're reading him when he's at his most tired, and then when you get to the end of the series, you're seeing him at his most fresh. But I also see this kind of thing happen with students where, you'll say like, okay, you have an hour, draw 5 pages in your sketchbook, and students will spend like 30 minutes on 1 page. And it's like, okay, do the math, right? 5 pages, 60 minutes, you should spend 12 minutes per page.
Right.
Like you're already behind. So now your pages 2 through 5 are compromised. Like when we do this again next week, like set yourself a timer or somehow force yourself. And so as a compromise, what Billy is describing here, I think if you describe this to someone, I'm going to jump ahead and tip my hand here and tell you that I liked the issue, even though we haven't talked about the comic yet. I think if you describe this, to someone who hadn't read the issue, they might think, oh man, this issue is going to look like rushed or really inconsistent. I actually find that the issue is remarkably consistent.
Well, to go back to what Mark said, I did hop around as much as I could. Like I tried to get all the jungle foliage out of the way. I think there's a Facebook photo of all my pages spread out, and kind of like the 33 King Kong, you're just kind of like dropping foliage in the foreground to make it read as a jungle.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because there were panels that I do try and like repeat in the issue to save me a background. There's I'm tipping my hand now.
Yeah, you copied and pasted the kitchen.
Yes, but I the filmmaker in me did try and manipulate things. Like the lights are off on the second kitchen, so there's more shadows. And I do think I switched things up a little bit, but that is the Jurassic Park kitchen for anyone wondering.
Was there any talk early on of someone else inking you? Because this book often has an inker.
It never came up.
Okay, you were just going to pencil and ink this.
They wanted tight pencils at first, and then I think when they all realized how slow I was being, I think we all kind of just understood, like, I just need to ink these.
Okay.
Never that they were being farmed out to an inker, but it was just like, guys, I can't pencil and ink. I just need to draw off of my layouts. I just need to ink. Cobra Casino gets repeated, and Dr. Mindbender's lab gets repeated. But what I was going to say, it was funny hopping around the script. I'm looking at it right now on my lap. I was dreading page 8. And to the credit of me loving G.I. Joe and Larry Hama, like, if you think you're an awesome comic artist, you need to draw an issue of G.I. Joe.
Because
it will challenge you in ways you don't want to be challenged.
Because you might have to draw a construction site and also a casino interior and also an industrial kitchen interior and also several characters in very particular costumes.
Yes, that was the page I was like, oh no, this is page 8 day.
Yeah, the joke is that it takes a writer, like 5 minutes or less to write 2-page spread, big battle in Times Square.
Right.
Like Avengers versus whoever, and then
Every
it takes the
single
artist.
Avenger. Yeah.
And then it takes the artist like 3 days to draw that. That's actually a really good point, Billy. That anyone who thinks that they're a good comics artist or an artist of a certain level should draw an issue of G.I. Joe, and that embedded in that is this thing that I always say, which is that there is no other. There are all these things that happen in G.I. Joe comics that don't happen in other comics.
Agreed.
Like, It's not just like very particular machine guns. It's not just like very weird looking tanks and helicopters. It's other stuff too.
Well, I was looking too. I was counting the environments. Like I buy my comics weekly still. And I was like, no other comic like G.I. Joe. Larry will take you 12 different places in an issue.
Yeah.
Not just the ESU campus and Peter Parker's apartment.
Something on that page, we're getting into the detail of this now, but on that casino page that we were talking about, I noticed that the design of the casino, the coming soon Cobra Casino, was different to the design of the casino being built next to it.
Oh, I was hoping we'd save that for I Spy.
Sorry.
Okay, here's the funny thing. That is, oh gosh. Dr. Mindbender says, "You must admit my plan to demolish the old HQ building. I'm not going to. Concurrently with erecting the new casino was absolutely genius, Laura 343. Laura 343. That, there's not a lot of reference. I think my comic books, issue 74, The Battle of Cobra Island, shows their citadel, their old headquarters. You're looking at that with the Cobra Casino being erected behind it.
Ah,
but
so that's the remnants of the Cobra citadel being demolished or being deconstructed.
Okay, so is this a coloring mistake? Is the thing with the two Cobra symbols that's in front of the construction site, should that not be pink?
I didn't want to tell you that, Tim, but
I'll put a positive spin on it. Maybe if any of the fine folks at IDW are listening to this or read the email that I'm going to send in an hour, it's a very polite, very short email. Maybe they could fix this for the eventual softcover collection.
I have learned that comic books are very similar to subplans as an elementary school teacher. Like, you want to leave super tight subplans so you don't come back and your room's a disaster. And I did not give good subplans.
Oh, you mean like notes to the colorist?
I should have said, hey, that's the Citadel.
Right, that's one building in front of the other.
Well, I don't know how big a Citadel is compared to a casino, because now we're talking like Star Wars proportions.
I mean, we're
like that casino is like 4 times as big as the Citadel.
My mental no prize was that this, also the way I explained it to myself was that the thing that we see there on the left is the casino being built, and it's being built, after the fact that they've come up with some quick marketing materials on a billboard, and so the casino will look different in reality to the initial marketing material billboard on the right.
That was actually vaguely, as I noticed the discrepancy, my no prize as well.
I actually love the coloring. The more it grows on me. The fact that it does look like, Dr. Mindbender says, concurrently. Like, it looks like they're building it out of the old Citadel.
Yeah.
But to jump the gun on I Spy, if we're all looking at page 8, the second panel, if you look to the left of the old Citadel getting torn apart, you will see 2 bats carrying rubble. This is the ultimate I Spy.
You mean in panel 2?
In panel 2, they are purple, the same color as the Citadel. Do you see like their T-faces, their T-shaped faces?
Oh, yeah. On the bottom left, in between 2 bits of yellow for the crane.
Right. And again, it takes me 4 times as long to color something as it does to draw it. So I thought for sure.
Oh, sorry, I've just seen it.
I thought for sure poor Jay Brown would give me way more time to send in sub-plans. And, I procrastinated, and it was colored, and I was like, holy crap, good for him.
So, all right, so we've gotten your stopwatch method for cranking out these pages.
Right.
Yeah, what about the photo reference?
That kind of went out the window when I got my deadline.
All of the photos that you took, it looked like some of them might have been taken in the school gym locker or something, the storage.
No. That was my garage.
Okay.
with my brother. He kind of doubled as Outback and Shipwreck, and they're only in the first 5 pages. And then I thought, I'll come back and take reference photos later. And then I got my deadline, and then I'm like, okay, references out.
And it looked like you went to the extent of one of them that were you shooting a leaf blower at your brother to kind of show the force of the wind?
Yes, it's got to open his shirt in a natural. I don't know how fast the whale can travel, but I was going for verisimilitude.
While you said that word, I should have been checking on the internet how fast the whale can travel.
However fast a kid can throw it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So you finish your issue. You send in your last page. Were there any corrections? Did you have any after the fact interaction with Waltz or Hama or J. Brown?
No. You kind of picture this Marvel bullpen, but it's just your house and everything that you see every day. J. Brown sent complimentary emails at the beginning, I think for the first 5 pages. And I'm very terrible about returning emails. So I thanked him. And I almost wanted to say, like, he's got a tough job of interpreting black and white art. Like, I know what I drew, but to look at it, it's a lot more difficult than those adult coloring books you can buy where everything's separated easily. Like, again, it takes me like 4 times as long to color something. So the fact that he turned these out, like, my jaw dropped, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Did you have a victory lap this past Wednesday when your issue of G.I. Joe showed up at a comic book store that you could go to?
I was tickled. I got a lot of Facebook responses. I did kind of pimp this thing like 7 days in a row on Facebook, like kind of breaking down step by step. No one knew I was doing it at the time, so I kind of pulled an Ozymandias on everybody. But I didn't want anyone to think, my priorities were compromised or anything. So my Facebook posts were kind of like, hey, back in September, it's too late to stop me.
And now that you have drawn an entire issue, penciled and inked an entire issue of G.I. Joe and drawn a cover, might you draw another?
I would love to, but it's also kind of exhausting. As an elementary school art teacher, I've realized it's all about scratching creative itches. And I buy Savage Dragon monthly for the last 25 years. Like, Eric Larson's an itchy dude.
Because he hops around and writes and draws other things.
Right.
In addition to his own thing.
Yes, but he has that itch that he scratches twice a month. Me drawing an issue of G.I. Joe, I have found, like, okay, time to work on something else. I don't know if I could handle being the monthly artist, but it was definitely fun.
Maybe next summer, maybe the scheduling gods could align so that next summer, when you have some more free time, in a year that might be celebrating a gigantic freaking anniversary for G.I. Joe, maybe some editor and writer types, if they were interested in having you back, could wend a script your way, and it could get drawn and published. Wouldn't that be nice?
In my mind, I think July would be like someone would be penciling 298, 299. I'm an art teacher, not a math teacher, but I think that's how that would work scheduling.
In my mind, it's just an additional mini series on the side. That's like these self-contained issues that are running right now, such that editorial could get a few sort of ahead of time without so directly landing on top of the schedule of the monthly book. Though I understand that for an editor and a writer and a letterer, doing double the issues is a lot more work.
Right. No, I would love to contribute anything more to Joe. It's fun.
And I was curious to see what sort of reaction people would have as well to your style, because it is a slightly different from the typical kind of I guess Tim, what's the word you use? It's like a adventure comic style. Is that
American adventure style? This is in the larger Venn diagram. This is American adventure style.
Okay.
But
because it's not. There's a slight more sort of towards the end of kind of slightly more cartooning in the in there and stuff like that.
If we're talking about Venn diagrams, this is not a Bigfoot style, right? This is not like Jim Davis drawing Garfield. This is not caricature, right? Like Jack Davis doing Mad Magazine or like movie posters. And while there's a little, there is more cartooning in the faces, like a little more exaggeration, eyes, noses, than a Ron Wagner or a Rod Wiggum. It's still American adventure style. This also isn't revealing, for example, like a ton of or any like heavy manga influence. Mm-hmm. There aren't panels where like all the backgrounds are speed lines or like the way that a character moves their arm is like drawn several times with speed lines. But yes, I do agree with you that this is a little off to the side of that sort of most traditional G.I. Joe art style.
Tim's probably more knowledgeable and Billy's had more time to think about this, but the sort of the kind of creators that I was put in mind of as sort of slightly like Brian Shearer and Howard Chaykin, and those aren't particularly on the nose, but I was trying to think of what other creators do I think have a similar style, and I couldn't think of much else better than that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Billy, where do you think of what artists, comics or not comics, were you looking at when you were younger? What art were you thinking of when you drew this?
I was gonna say, as a teenager, as a preteen, all the Image guys, which I don't think shows up in this comic. As a mid-teenager to early 20s, definitely Brian Stelfreeze. But that doesn't show up in this comic either. I love John Romita Jr., but I don't think that shows up in this comic either. I was looking at Wally Wood Jungle Pictures because I know Larry was a protege or an assistant. And I've always wondered, like, oh man, if only Wally Wood got to draw a G.I. Joe written by Larry Hama.
Where the other thing that I'll say about the art here that is different than a lot of G.I. Joe, but it's more a lot of recent G.I. Joe, is that Billy is inking with a lot of very thick lines. Mm-hmm. And so, we've been talking about page 8, the page with the casino and the exterior and interior and the kitchen. If you look on the page that faces it, page 9, if you look at the final 2 panels, Laura, the Crimson Guard, look at at her elbow where her arm is bent, and then look at the line next to Dr. Mindbender's, separating Dr. Mindbender's forehead from the green tank behind him. These are very thick lines. And if we think of artists who have drawn G.I. Joe recently, right, like Andrew Lee Griffith or Brian Shearer or Shannon Gallant inked by Shearer or inking himself, or artists who have drawn a lot of G.I. Joe recently have tended to draw with a thinner line, if not a very thin line. And so there's a certain heft on the page of this issue that comes from how Billy is inking. And also there's a lot of spotted black ink, right? So that second use of the kitchen interior where Billy copies and pastes it, but then shadows in a couple of walls to show that it's nighttime, or just everyone look at page 1, right? Like when other artists have drawn that much ocean for The Whale, they have left that open, and Jay Brown then goes in and puts color there. Same thing with the final panel of page 1, right? Like most of this whale is blacked out. And that's partly that's because it's nighttime, but partly that's because that's how this guy draws. And so these are besides sort of like cartooniness versus realism versus like whatever, these are the use of black ink is the other thing that makes this issue look and feel distinct from a lot of other issues.
And I'd add more satisfying to see the drawn waves rather than just a sort of a photoshopped picture of photo of waves sort of overlaid on the more open art. So yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm sure that Tim. I was looking at it and thinking, yeah, Tim will like those waves. The drawn.
Oh
waves.
yes. Wait, is this my first note? Talking Joe 287. Jay Brown's colors work with Penn's heavy spotting of blacks. That's the first thing that I wrote.
Oh.
Colors are still a little hot for me, more saturated than I would prefer, particularly for all these nighttime scenes. But that there's so much black ink balances the colors well, and I think Brown sort of eases off a little bit, like whether consciously or not.
Well, I don't know if Larry Hama planned this, but it was like watching it unfold and drawing it was like my own mission. If any of these Joes are seasick, they're probably like, I can't wait to get to the beach. That was me. I was like, I can't wait to not draw waves anymore or ripples. And then I get to the jungle, and for 2 pages, I'm like, I cannot wait to quit drawing the jungle. And then I get to the construction site, and I'm like, ooh, we need to go inside, guys.
And then you have a parking lot filled with cars.
Yes.
Right? Like, everyone remember, right? Like, Mike Mignola doesn't draw Hellboy in cities because Mike Mignola doesn't want to draw cities.
Well, if
horses.
you look at that parking lot, I shouldn't draw them either. I lined up Hot Wheels on the dining room table.
Nice.
That's both hilarious. That's also just like with a straight face nod. I'm just nodding yes. Like, yes, you get an illustration job, whether it's a single image, a cover, comics, interiors, and you take reference photos or you find reference photos and sort of anything that works.
The thought that I started on that didn't quite get to the end of was that I was wondering what the reaction might be to this, and generally the reaction to the art style, the art of this issue seems to be very positive. So pat on the back for you there. I think there was a few people sort of going, oh, the newbies, not interested in them, which isn't necessarily my own reaction, but possibly some of the vocal people that we see on forums aren't necessarily always representative from the wider readership as well. So normally I think we've started digging into the issue, but so let's rewind a little bit and say we are ready to talk about the issue. It is issue 287.
Warning team. As the sands of time descend, temporal disruption has set in, and it is here that we must leave our brave adventurers, Mark, Tim, and Billy. Remain patient, as we will pick up where we leave them in part 2 of our chat, as we dig into the detail of issue 287. Join us then, if you dare.